When a woman ignores you, most men immediately think that simply going no contact will automatically give them power. They believe that disappearing, not texting, not calling, or avoiding interaction is enough to shake her ego and make her come running. But the truth is, no contact alone is meaningless if it's not backed by genuine emotional detachment. The difference between a man who uses silence effectively and a man who merely disappears lies entirely in his inner state. If your mind, your emotions, and your self-worth are still tethered to her attention, the no contact strategy will not work. It won't shake her, it won't shift the dynamic, and it certainly won't crush her ego. She will notice immediately if your absence is rooted in anxiety rather than confidence, and instead of being impressed, she may feel validated in her ability to control you. Emotional detachment is the foundation of true power in situations like this. It's not about pretending you don't care or playing games. It's about genuinely separating your emotional energy from her actions, her silence, and her approval. When you are detached, your life no longer revolves around waiting for her to respond, interpreting every text, or imagining what she is thinking. You stop letting her behavior dictate your mood or influence your confidence. This detachment is what makes your absence meaningful. It's what gives your silence weight. Without it, no contact is just an empty action, a hollow attempt at control that she will see through immediately. Detachment also allows you to observe her behavior without being emotionally reactive. When a woman senses that a man is affected by her ignoring him, she gains power. She sees that she can manipulate his emotions, draw him in, or make him insecure. But when you are truly detached, you observe instead of reacting. You watch how she responds to your absence, but your emotions remain unaffected. You are not chasing. You are not panicking. You are not negotiating your self-worth to win her back. That calm, grounded energy creates an invisible strength that commands attention far more than words or gestures ever could. Most men fail to recognize that the impact of no contact depends on what they are doing with their time and energy while she is absent. If you are sitting at home overthinking, checking your phone every 5 minutes, or imagining what she is doing, your absence has no power. Detachment requires redirecting your energy to yourself, your goals, your growth, your health, your social circle, your purpose. It's not the silence itself that creates the shift in her ego. It's the life you build and live while she is absent. When she starts hearing about your progress, seeing your confidence, and sensing your independence, that's when the real effect of no contact emerges. Emotional detachment also forces a man to confront his own value. It requires asking yourself, am I dependent on her attention? Do I tie my happiness to her reactions? Do I let her actions define my self-worth? Answering these questions honestly and building a mindset where your value comes from within is what truly empowers you. When she notices that you are unaffected by her attempts to draw you out, that you have moved beyond needing validation from her, her ego begins to crack. She realizes that her power over you was an illusion. She expected you to crumble or chase, but instead, you remain composed and unshakable. No contact without emotional detachment is like trying to cut down a tree with a plastic knife. It might make a mark, but it won't create change. Detachment transforms your absence into an invisible force that shifts the dynamics, commands respect, and makes her question her own choices. It shows her that your presence is earned, not given freely, and that her silence cannot bend you to her will. This is the foundation of crushing her ego, not through games, manipulation, or anger, but through unwavering self-mastery. Ending line. And when you master true emotional detachment, your absence becomes a force she cannot ignore, and the power she thought she had over you disappears completely. When a woman ignores you, her silence is designed to test you. She expects that absence will create panic, anxiety, or desperation. She assumes that no contact will make you crumble, that you will chase, question yourself, or act from fear rather than confidence. But this is where most men fall into the trap of playing defense instead of offense. No contact alone is not enough to crush her ego. The real power comes from using that distance strategically to rebuild yourself, to elevate your mindset, and to create a reality where she no longer holds the emotional leverage she thought she had. When she expects you to fall apart and you rise instead, that is the moment her ego begins to crack. The key is understanding that she underestimates your capacity to grow in her absence. While she assumes that silence will weaken you, it can actually become your strongest tool if you use it correctly. Every day she doesn't hear from you is a day you can focus on leveling up your life, whether it's your fitness, your career, your social skills, or your mental discipline. These are the areas that truly matter. By improving yourself while she waits, you create a powerful contrast between the version of you she tried to manipulate and the man you are becoming. That contrast is what makes her question her own judgment and her control over you. Most men waste this opportunity by obsessing over her behavior, analyzing her silence, or attempting to predict her actions. They remain tied to her reactions, effectively giving her the power they are trying to reclaim. But the men who truly understand the psychology behind attraction and ego manipulation know that the moment she expects you to crumble is the perfect moment to redirect all your energy inward. By focusing on yourself, you shift the emotional balance. You stop being a pawn in her game and you become the player moving the pieces. She begins to sense that the man she tried to destabilize is untouchable because his focus is unshakable. Rebuilding your identity during this period of no contact is about more than just physical or financial improvements. It's about mindset. It's about emotional control. It's about refusing to let her absence dictate your confidence or happiness. It's about understanding that your value is inherent and does not depend on her recognition or approval. When she sees that her tactics no longer have an effect on your composure, she experiences a subtle but profound ego shift. She realizes that the man she thought she could manipulate is now operating from a higher plane of self-mastery. This approach also sends a silent, powerful message without a single word. When you rebuild your life in her absence, your actions speak louder than anything you could say. The new level of confidence, purpose, and composure you exude makes her see that she underestimated you. She begins to regret her attempts to control or ignore you because your absence and improvement highlight her own insecurities. She feels a sense of loss and reflection, realizing that the version of you she took for granted no longer exists in the same way. That awareness alone can have a profound impact on her ego. By using no contact as a tool for self-reinvention rather than just avoidance, you convert a passive strategy into an active power play. She thought her silence would make you chase, but instead, it has given you the time and space to rise above her influence. The more you build yourself, the more she feels the shift in energy. Her attempts to assert control backfire because your attention and effort are no longer available to be manipulated. This is the fundamental difference between men who waste no contact and men who turn it into an instrument of dominance. Ending line, and when she sees the man you've become while she expected you to fall, her ego shatters not because you acted out, but because you grew beyond her control. When a woman ignores you, one of the most effective ways to crush her ego is to stop placing her at the center of your life. Most men make the mistake of assuming that maintaining focus on her, even in her absence, will keep her interested or make her regret ignoring them. The truth is exactly the opposite. The more you prioritize her attention, the more you reinforce her belief that she holds power over you. Real strength comes from redirecting your energy, your time, and your focus back onto yourself. When she notices that your life is full, active, and purpose Driven without her involvement, it disrupts her sense of control and challenges her assumptions about your value. Rebuilding your priorities around your own growth is not about revenge, it's about self-respect. Every hour you spend improving your fitness, advancing your career, cultivating new skills, or expanding your social circle communicates a silent but undeniable message. You are not dependent on her presence for your happiness. You are not defined by her attention or her approval. She begins to notice that her absence doesn't disrupt your flow, and that realization strikes at the core of her ego. She expected you to overthink, obsess, and chase, but instead, you are creating a life she cannot automatically access or influence. One of the most powerful psychological effects occurs when a man replaces her importance with purpose. She is accustomed to being a priority, and she expects that even a brief distance will destabilize you. But when you channel that energy into yourself, she begins to experience a subtle panic. She senses the shift in attention and feels that she is no longer in the driver's seat. Her attempts to control the emotional dynamic backfire because you voluntarily removed her from your internal world. This detachment communicates confidence, independence, and self-assurance, qualities that are magnetic yet intimidating. Focusing on yourself also elevates your energy, which she can perceive even without direct interaction. When you are actively improving, socially engaged, mentally sharp, and emotionally stable, you exude a presence that she cannot ignore. This presence is built not on words, not on chasing, not on reacting to her behavior, but on the quiet strength of self-mastery. She begins to see that your life is richer, more disciplined, and more satisfying than before, and the contrast highlights her diminished influence. This is the moment where her ego starts to crack. She realizes that the man she tried to manipulate is no longer available for her games. Another key aspect of this approach is consistency. It's not enough to redirect your energy for a day or two. The transformation must be sustained. The longer you maintain focus on yourself, the more undeniable your independence becomes. She may attempt to provoke a reaction, test your boundaries, or create situations to regain control. But when you remain consistent, unshaken, and steadfast in your priorities, she sees clearly that her strategies no longer work. Her ego, which relied on the belief that you would always react to her behavior, begins to erode. This shift also changes the emotional narrative of your relationship. By elevating your life above her influence, you remove her ability to dictate your feelings, your confidence, and your value. She starts to experience a sense of loss and reflection because she now understands that her absence does not equal power over you. The more you focus on growth and purpose, the more she perceives that she is no longer central to your happiness. This realization is far more impactful than confrontation, manipulation, or argument. It is subtle, quiet, and devastating to her ego. Ending line, and when she begins to recognize that her absence no longer matters and that your life thrives without her, her ego falters, leaving you in complete control of your own power and worth. When a woman ignores you, her ego expects a reaction. She anticipates that you will chase, question, or emotionally unravel, and she uses that expectation as a measure of her control. But the single most effective way to disrupt that is to maintain emotional composure. True power in these situations doesn't come from anger, confrontation, or overcompensation. It comes from staying calm, collected, and unwavering. When you refuse to react, when you do not feed into her attempts to manipulate your emotions, you demonstrate a level of maturity and strength that she didn't anticipate. That lack of reaction is far more potent than any words or gestures because it communicates confidence and self-control. Emotional composure is rooted in the understanding that her actions do not define your value. Most men tie their self-worth to external validation, and when a woman pulls away, they panic. They overanalyze, they overcommunicate, they try to force engagement. But a man who maintains composure knows that his worth is independent of her behavior. He does not need immediate feedback or approval to remain grounded. This internal stability shifts the dynamic entirely. Suddenly, her silence no longer holds power over you, and that realization shakes her ego in ways no argument ever could. Composure also allows you to see the situation clearly. When you are not reacting emotionally, you can observe her behavior without bias or anxiety clouding your judgment. You can assess whether her silence stems from insecurity, manipulation, or simple disinterest. This clarity is crucial because it enables you to respond strategically, not impulsively. When a man understands what is happening rather than being swept away by emotional turbulence, he positions himself as someone untouchable, someone whose actions are deliberate and whose frame cannot be broken. Maintaining composure also sends a subtle but powerful message. It shows her that you are not a man to be controlled by games or silence. You are not available for manipulation, and your energy is protected. Women are highly perceptive to emotional energy, often more so than words. The moment she senses that her silence does not disturb you, she experiences cognitive dissonance. She expects you to react to chase, to validate her. Instead, she encounters calm and control, which creates both intrigue and discomfort. That discomfort is the catalyst for ego disruption. Another crucial aspect is consistency. Composure must be maintained over time. A single calm response may be dismissed, but continuous, unshakable emotional stability changes the entire dynamic. She begins to test again, perhaps with subtler tactics, but each test is met with the same grounded presence. This repetition reinforces that her previous assumptions about your emotional availability are no longer valid. Her ego, which relied on predictable reactions, starts to erode because she realizes she cannot control the outcome through manipulation. Composure is also inherently attractive. It reflects mastery over oneself, strength of character, and a life not dictated by others' whims. Women are drawn to men who possess this quality because it signals security, independence, and high value. By remaining emotionally composed, you elevate yourself in her perception. She sees a man who operates from his own standards, who does not chase, who does not bend, and who is confident enough to let her actions speak for themselves. That perception alone is enough to create regret, curiosity, and self-reflection on her part. Ending line, and when she begins to realize that her silence cannot disturb your calm, your unshakable composure silently dismantles the control she once thought she held. One of the most powerful ways to crush her ego when she ignores you is to build a life she cannot automatically access. Most men think that silence or no contact alone is enough to create impact, but in reality, the silence only becomes meaningful when it is paired with action, growth, and progress. When she expected you to sit idle, obsess, or wait by the phone, and instead she sees that you are leveling up in multiple areas of your life, the psychological effect is profound. This is where the combination of distance and visible personal evolution works like a silent yet devastating force against her ego. Creating a life she can't access begins with purpose. Purpose acts as the foundation of your energy and confidence. Every time you focus on your goals, career, fitness, or personal growth, you demonstrate that your time and effort are non-negotiable. Your attention is now directed toward things that truly matter, not toward validating her or chasing her approval. Women are acutely aware of shifts in focus. When they see that their absence doesn't disrupt your life, but instead coincides with your growth, it triggers a deep sense of reflection and ego questioning. She begins to feel the distance not as mere silence, but as a demonstration of your independence and power. Another critical aspect of this strategy is momentum. Momentum is the consistent progress you make while she expects stagnation. It's the small daily victories, the discipline maintained, the skills learned, the social and professional strides made, all of which she notices consciously or subconsciously. This momentum not only strengthens your confidence, but also highlights her diminishing influence over you. She expected the pause in contact to weaken your value, but your ongoing progression proves the opposite. Her ego, built on the assumption that she could destabilize you, begins to feel the impact. Social proof also amplifies the effect. When you cultivate relationships, expand your circle, and engage with people who share your values and energy, he perceives that your world does not revolve around her. She notices that your presence is valuable elsewhere and that your attention cannot be taken for granted. Social validation combined with personal success sends a silent yet undeniable message. You are a man with options, direction, and control. This creates a subtle but intense internal conflict for her ego because the narrative she relied on, that she could influence or dominate you, is no longer true. Building a life she cannot access also demonstrates emotional resilience. She expects you to be unsettled by her distance, but instead, she observes that your life is moving forward with or without her. This is a profound disruption to her psychological expectations. She begins to experience feelings she did not anticipate: doubt, curiosity, and a sense of loss. By consistently showing that your focus is internal rather than dependent on her reactions, you indirectly force her to acknowledge that her behavior does not dictate your value. Furthermore, by creating this life, you are reclaiming your energy and self-respect. Each step you take away from her influence is a reinforcement of your standards and priorities. You are proving to yourself, first and foremost, that your happiness, success, and fulfillment are your responsibility, not hers. The psychological effect on her is secondary but extremely powerful. As she senses the shift, she begins to question her own decisions, her own ego, and her own behavior, because the man she underestimated is no longer available for manipulation or emotional control. Ending line. And when she finally notices the life you've built and the momentum you've maintained while she tried to control you, her ego cannot withstand the realization that she no longer has access to the man she once thought she owned. The final step to truly crushing her ego when she ignores you is to make her realize that while she may have been a chapter in your life, she is not the entire story. Most men focus on trying to get a reaction, to elicit regret, or to reclaim attention. But the real power comes from demonstrating that you are independent, self-sufficient, and untouchable. When she sees that your happiness, your progress, and your sense of self are not contingent on her presence, the impact on her ego is immediate and undeniable. She expected you to crumble, to chase, to validate her importance, but instead she sees a man who is fully engaged with his own life, moving forward without hesitation. This approach begins with detachment, not just physical, but mental and emotional. She may think that ignoring you has given her control, but the moment you stop investing emotional energy in her absence, she begins to feel the void she created. Emotional detachment allows you to observe her behavior without being influenced by it. You see her tactics, her manipulations, or even her attempts to test you for what they are, and you respond with calm, composed action, or more often, no action at all. That absence of reaction communicates far more than words ever could. It says that your value is inherent, untouchable, and independent of her approval. At the same time, this period of silence and detachment is an opportunity to elevate yourself. You focus on your goals, your habits, your social circles, and your personal growth. Every step you take in building a better version of yourself compounds the psychological effect on her. She expected a man preoccupied by her silence, anxious over her absence, but instead she sees a man whose life is full, dynamic, and unaffected by her actions. This contrast between expectation and reality shakes her sense of superiority and forces her to confront her own miscalculations. Her ego begins to crack because she realizes she cannot manipulate or predict you as she once thought. Another critical factor is subtlety. You do not need to flaunt your achievements or deliberately provoke jealousy. The power lies in consistency and authenticity. When your life naturally radiates independence, competence, and emotional stability, she perceives it instinctively. She senses that the man she ignored or underestimated is operating on a higher plane of self-mastery. That perception alone triggers reflection, regret, and a re-evaluation of her own actions. The very thing she thought would make her influential, the silence, the withdrawal, the tests, lose their potency because she realizes her control was never real to begin with. Part of this process also involves creating a sense of scarcity. When she notices that your time, attention, and effort are no longer freely available, it generates curiosity and introspection. She begins to question whether she has taken your presence for granted, whether her behavior was justified, and whether she underestimated the value of your character. You are not chasing, not explaining, not performing. You are simply existing as a man who has chosen himself over her manipulation. That in itself is a profound lesson that challenges her assumptions and shakes her ego to its core. Finally, the ultimate psychological impact comes when she understands that you can be replaced, but she cannot replace what you've become. Your independence, your composure, and your unwavering focus on self-improvement establish a standard that is unattainable for anyone else in her life. She begins to feel that her absence and her games cannot diminish your value. Instead, she recognizes that the man she ignored is far beyond her reach emotionally and mentally, and that realization hits harder than any confrontation ever could. Ending line. And when she finally comprehends that you are unshakable, self-sufficient, and entirely untethered from her control, her ego shatters not because you fought her, but because you rose above her influence.